Alrighty then. So, maps in TTRPGs. Yeah, people use those a lot. But how often do you use them as a plot device instead of simply having one on the table that you stare at and maybe, move action figures around to mark where your characters are located? Well, that is the question of this one. Because let's face it, as a saying goes, knowledge is power. And maps represent knowledge. As such, they make treasure and might be something you find in a tomb as an ancient relic from a forgotten age. Oh, yes. Do people actually do that often? No. But sometimes. Sometimes they do. Anyways, so first example I've decided to use is, of course, the legendary Piri map, because, well, it's legendary for several reasons. One of those is the interesting art style, but also this is one of those maps where the people who compiled it used information when compiling it that we don't have. We have access to some of the information that was used to make this. We don't even know where certain parts of the map came from. And Reis was doing his level best to compile every piece of information known about world geography into a single map, and somehow got copies of maps that shouldn't have ever gotten outside of Portugal. Yeah, I don't know how that would work out, but it did apparently. The guy was kind of obsessed with Christopher Columbus. Anyway, so this thing on the right, that's not the Pure Reis map. That's made by a different cartographer in a similar time period who made a much, much lower resolution map, but it is seemingly meant to be an accurate-ish representation of what the globe looks like, right? Possibly? Question mark? Yeah, it is actually recognizable as geography, though. You can see, like, oh, hey, this thing here, that looks like it's supposed to be Spain. That looks like Italy. That looks like the Sahara. That looks like the Red Sea. That looks like the Indian Ocean. That looks like Madagascar. Okay, that's a lot of actual information and recognizable geography on a realistically, this is approximately a postage stamp size illustration in a book. Yeah, really, postage stamp sized. Anyways, moving on. So, the Pure Reis map is written in a 1500s dialect of Ottoman Turkish. Yeah, good luck reading that. I can't. So I found a version of it that was translated into English because, let's face it, I can't read it the other way. And also redrawn to be simpler art style, not necessarily better, mind you, because it leaves out most of the parts that make the original interesting. It also, however, takes out a lot of the distracting clutter, but, anyways. The Piri Reis map has a whole lot of things that are interesting for a variety of reasons. Like, one, the geography is head scratching, but also because again, he swiped Christopher Columbus's maps, but Christopher Columbus's maps weren't actually accurate. So, because he was using Christopher Columbus's maps, he copied all of Christopher Columbus's mistakes. Which, yeah, that's a thing. Anyways, though, Piri Reis was a professional cartographer, so he did actually put a lot of work into it and made something that was genuinely a useful map. The real world lore that he mentions as part of this is very interesting, though, because it has like things like, hey, this is a country where they don't wear clothes and stuff like that. Like, here's a place where there is a red dye called Vakami. What is he even talking about? I don't know. But it's the sort of vague, cryptic things that you could have written on a map that you give to your players in a role-playing game. It's like, oh hey, yeah, here's this country where they sell a valuable resource that maybe possibly you would want to acquire. Interesting stuff. Seriously though, the level of real-world lore that goes into this is insane. Yeah. Do I even understand what some of it means? No. Like this part here, it talks about Frank sailors. Frankish usually refers to people from France. Why would French sailors be using a Spanish name for the ocean and calling it the Sea of Spain? Also, this is like the only time that a word that sounds like French or related to French is used in the entire text that I saw. So having him mention French people is weird. I'm not entirely sure that he's actually talking about French people. It might be something else. It's kind of awkward because, yes, this has been translated into English. That doesn't mean I understand it. Oh yeah, Genoese. That's the name of a specific city. Which, yeah, it was a place that a lot of people doing serious navigation stuff were headquartered in back in the day. Here we have the probably longest section of text where he's talking about Christopher Columbus's exploits. He found that quite fascinating, apparently. Anyways, another interesting thing here is that he apparently believed that Christopher Columbus actually went to South Asia. Like things like it says Hind, Sind, and China. Well, Hind is the southern part of the continent of Asia, where India, where the Hindu people live. And Sind was an old name for the region that it includes modern-day Pakistan. No, I don't get that one. I don't understand how that linguistically makes sense. And China, well, here's the thing. The name China has been just what European people call it. They've never actually called themselves that. Anyways, but yeah, it's like the old name China got applied to modern day China by foreigners, basically. Yeah, the actual name they use is something like Zhongguo or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, well, here's another thing. I mentioned that there was interesting art, and he also has annotations describing the beasts that live in some of these interesting foreign lands. And here is one that talks about an oxen with one horn. Here's the thing. This picture was not drawn by someone who actually saw the creature. This is merely based on a verbal description, as far as I understand it. Also, this thing here looks like a mountain lion. Why is the word Sami used? I don't know. But mountain lion is in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the most number of common names of any known animal species because of the fact that it has a common name in almost every Native American language there is. Which Native American language used the word Sami for a mountain lion? I have no idea, but probably one of them in the coastal part of Brazil. Anyways, but yeah, this is something where, sending a party on a mission to acquire some exotic wildlife from a faraway land, you could do that. do, do, do. Now, the Cantina Planisphere is thought to be one of the maps that Piri used because certain parts of the coastline matches up rather specifically. Note how the windlasses on this one are in different places than on Piri's map. Well, I don't understand how windlasses work. I just know that people use them for direction finding somehow. So I don't actually understand what the significance of that is. I suspect that that different methods of using windlasses were probably proprietary secrets or something weird like that. Anyway, though, here someone cross-referenced it by taking the uh, Cantina Planisphere map and putting thick, dark lines on it to mark where Pura Reis's coastlines were, which some of them actually do match up almost exactly. Some of them. Note, however, that the Cantina Planisphere map is only one of the sources, and he also used, maps created by Christopher Columbus, which don't match the Cantina Planisphere map at all. And seemingly left out the parts of it that were on the Cantina Planisphere map by assuming Christopher Columbus's. Yeah, I don't get that. Anyway, whatever. This is one of those things, though, where you could have people who are questioning the accuracy of a map compare it with a different map and be like, huh, this is similar. This is drastically different. Why does this map appear to show lakes in the Sahara? I've got questions and I don't have answers. I do have to say that whoever drew macaws on the section of South America that corresponds to the Amazon jungle nailed that part. Uh, I still have questions about their depiction of the Amazon, or sorry, Sahara. The Amazon actually mostly makes sense, mostly. Anyway, next. So this is an example of a map that is not made of something that's easily portable. Yeah, this is a Sumerian clay tablet. They use clay for a lot of things. The equivalent of grocery shopping lists. They would sometimes take a fired clay tablet. Okay, take a clay tablet, write their grocery list on it, fire the clay, and then hand it to a servant, and so that the servant would be able to easily remember what the shopping list is. They used fired clay tablets for that level of stuff. So of course they're going to draw maps on them too. And here's an example of one that is realistically, it's not a very detailed map. It really isn't. But, it's an example of a fired clay tablet with a map drawn on it. And here we have an example of something that you could use as inspiration for a spurious map, where you find a map where you're like, huh, this is strange. I don't recognize these islands. This isn't familiar to me. Oh, yeah, that's right, because the person who made this map is faking the whole thing. Yeah, this was created by the Zeno brothers, who were trying to undermine Christopher Columbus's claim of being the first to go to discover a trade route crossing the Atlantic Ocean to well, okay. Columbus believed that he was going to Asia. He wasn't. He was going to North America. But he was claiming to be the first to do so. And the Zeno brothers, who claimed to have spent years exploring the Atlantic Ocean and various islands and so on in the Atlantic Ocean, produced this map as proof that they had been to North America before Columbus had. Yeah, that part of the map that's named Estatiland, that's what they were claiming was part of Asia. Yeah, yeah. Oh, also, here's a neat thing. Mara or Terra Incognita. What this means is, literally means that we don't know what's over here. We don't even know if this is land or sea. We just know that something is over here, presumably. Because this is an incomplete map. Yeah, all the stuff I mentioned earlier about it being bad and what have you, it's incomplete. See, what's generally believed is that the people who made this took real maps and made a bastardized version to look like they'd added stuff to the map. Yeah. No. 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 They didn't even claim to go to most of the places that are on this map. Again, seriously, what the hell? But again, this is one of those things where in a story you can throw in the twist of like, hey, you got a map that no, that's actually not actually where it goes. No, no, this map is fake. But looking at a map, figuring out that it's fake, and confronting the person who's trying to sell a fake map, that could be a fun story arc to go on. Also, seriously, the names that are on here are Italian. That's why they don't match the normal names for these things. Also, because of the fact that this is a fake map, the people who made it may have just like completely gotten the names wrong. Good luck figuring any of that out. The people who made this died several hundred years ago. Anyways, now here's a different one. Remember how I was talking about windless navigation tools and so on and so forth, and how they're so drastically different from modern day latitude longitude coordinates? Yeah, the idea of latitude longitude coordinates is actually 2,000 years old. Seriously, Claudius Ptolemy came up with the idea of latitude longitude back in around the year 150 AD. Here is one where it's more explicitly shown. It's like you have all these like numbered grid things, like tick, 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 where you can just like cross-reference this point versus this point to find a location on the map. Doink, 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 doink. Which modern day maps almost exclusively use that, unless there's some local strip map that where latitude and longitude coordinates are too imprecise for useful navigation. Even those, a lot of them have a grid pattern anyways, even if it's not actual latitude longitude grids. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Ptolemy's latitude and longitude grids, as far as I know, don't actually match the ones we use in modern times. So that's another fun wrinkle you could throw at people, like having a method of marking the map that is similar to one that they're familiar with, but not quite the same. Like you find a map that has markings in some distance measurement, and you don't actually know what the distance measurement is. I mean, like, oh, you might think it's miles when it's actually something weird that's only 3/4 of a mile. And you don't actually know what this distance measurement is because you're not actually able to read everything on the map. It's in some dialect you don't fully understand. Yeah, stuff like that also comes up and stuff like this because, uh, like I mentioned before, with the whole thing of Ottoman Turkish, good luck finding someone in modern day times that actually has the ability to read that. But weird dialects, yeah, just having the things be written in a slightly different dialect, so you're not actually 100% sure of anything that the person who wrote it said. Yeah. This one, Latin. As far as I know, anyways, this is Latin. Which means I can kind of sort of understand some of it. Some of it. Like this here says Ocean, India, I think. I might be wrong, but anyway. Next up. Here's another example of a map that was something people like seriously tried to use in real life and isn't as terrible as it looks at first glance. Because at first glance, when you look at this, you're like, what the heck is that even? And then you realize that north is actually down. Yeah. South is up on this map. So this here is actually the Mediterranean, with the various islands in the Mediterranean, the Strait of Gibraltar. Here we have the Nile River Delta, the Red Sea, and all that. So it's not very precise geography. It really is not precise geography. It does, however, have a vaguely close to correct outline of most of the terrain features, though. But this is one of those things where figuring out what this is supposed to depict, that's one of those things where you like have someone do like a roll for insight or something to see if they can understand the map and maybe possibly fail and just like, oh, well, I guess you'll have to work on that, huh? Pity. To be honest, giving players a map and having them completely fail to figure it out can be hilarious and maybe possibly derail the story. So, if you have someone roll for insight when they need the map to continue the story, maybe, have a backup plan. And here we have this one. This is one of those things where, okay, again, it's a windless map. Doesn't have this one actually kind of sort of has latitude, longitude coordinates and windless, because if you look at the edge, it has numbers for like tick marks for latitude, longitude, as well as windless roses. Anyway, this one has all sorts of weird decorations on the map. Like you have various sea monsters, which, interesting potential fodder for bestiary entries. But also, it's like when you add stuff like that to a map, it also can be used as interesting foreshadowing for a game because, like, you have the forest of deadly vipers, and you throw in a picture of a massive snake with what looks like dragon wings sticking out of its head or something and spitting fire. Like, oh, that's what they mean by deadly vipers. Again, foreshadowing can be fun. And last we have the Turin map. One of several maps in the museum at Turin, anyways. Yeah, this particular one is approximately 3,000 years old, and the markings on it are marking the locations of various mines in some part of Egypt. Trying to figure out the exact locations of the places it's talking about in modern times would be something for a serious cartographer to work on. Not me. I don't know. But the thing with this, though, is that this is what I was talking about earlier with having maps as loot, is that you find a decaying map badly damaged, you think you can make out the location of an important site nearby. Maybe you can read what it says about that site, maybe not. Anyway, though, this is believed to be the locations of places where people were doing mining work 3,000 years ago. Yeah, I don't actually expect a 3,000-year-old mine to still have gold in it. I'm pretty sure the people who were mining the gold 3,000 years ago finished mining the gold at some point within those 3,000 years. But it is one of those things, though, that in a TTRPG setting, it gives players a reason to look at a certain site. You're like, oh, there's a map saying to go there. I wonder what you'll find there. Because one thing with gold mines is that you might find gold in a gold mine, not, in an ore vein, because the people mining the gold centuries ago probably mined those out. But cached gold, that's also a thing you can find in a gold mine, because the people mining the gold, they process it into a form that doesn't weigh several tons and might stash it in random holes because, they're not going to lug all of it out of the mine today. So, you might find something that people stored for later hidden in the mine. Again, it's one of those things where you give someone a reason to go to a certain location. I mean, maybe the reason that they go to that location is actually completely different from what is on the map. Because, if it was a gold mine 3,000 years ago, maybe today it is an orc encampment because the orcs heard that there was gold there and have been spending the last 30 years trying to find gold in a mine that was tapped out 2,000 years ago, and the orcs are too dumb to realize that. Maybe. You never know. That's up to whoever's writing the story, which in your case is probably not going to be me. So yeah, have fun writing your own stories. And with that, I will bid you see you later.